Good morning, everyone. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Medeiros Forster. I'm a corporate attorney in the Cannabis Law and Business Advisory Group at Burns & Levinson. I'm very excited for this panel this morning. In my opinion, it's one of the most fun and interesting panels we have on the agenda. We have an outstanding panelist group right here from various backgrounds, MSOs, local operators, and even some from the food and beverage industry. So I'd like to start off with having each of the panelists introduce yourselves, who you are, and what your role is at your current organization.
Ryan Crandall, so I'm the Chief Revenue Officer at Maramed.
Joe Hodis, Chief Marketing Officer for Wana Brands.
Kurt Youngren, Chief Revenue Officer for Root & Bloom.
Patricia Rossi, Chief Marketing and Strategy Officer for Acreage Holdings.
Thank you. To start diving into the topic, I'd like to set the stage a little bit and ask each of you, how would you define brands versus branding? Do you find those two terms to be the same or quite different in your day-to-day?
So, when I think about the question, it's really, brands are what we all know and love. We all have favorite ones. The branding is everything that supports that. So I feel like the branding is really everything that defines a brand and brings a brand to life.
I don't have a whole lot to add to that. It's a pretty concise answer. I think the only thing I can think of is to say that for me, the brand actually represents more than just the visual aspect that people see that they become maybe attached to. It's actually top to bottom and top down and bottoms up in terms of how do you interact with your customers, how do you interact with your partners. All of those elements that become part of the brand help make the brand, even though really it's the logo or it's the products that maybe that the consumer tends to be attached to.
Yeah, it's tough to go last because all the answers are gone. For me, the brand is how our consumer perceives it, whether we're a service, whether we're a product, whatever we're doing. And then the branding is, the work we do in communication, in messaging and stuff like that. So they're a little different for me.
Patricia, what about you?
For me, a brand is an experience. It's multidimensional. It's not just a logo on the page. It has to tell a story that is able to connect an audience with a product or a solution and make it really resonate and stick. I think also a brand is an experience in the sense that is multidimensional, and it's also, in my mind, the founding element of a repeatable growth model. So the brand is what people will come back and love, and that assumes execution excellence in a lot of different, the product, the display, all these elements. But if you create a brand that consumer love and build trust, then that's loyalty, and they'll come back for you, and that's how you start the growth model. So.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's interesting. So now that we kind of have a framework on brands and branding, I like to focus on brands. Is it possible to create a national brand in the cannabis industry?
Well, it's possible. It's being done. There's a lot of challenges with that, Lauren. Different states, different rules, different regulation. But it's a lot of work. I mean, I think Joe can speak to that quite well because he's been very successful at that. I'm local to Massachusetts. I have brands that are national brands that we represent, but we don't manufacture those here in Massachusetts.
We talk about national brands quite frequently as an aspiration in the industry, but I would say it depends upon the definition of national brand, right? So Wana is in 15 markets in Canada, so technically international brand, right? But we still can't execute multiple programs across all of those markets simultaneously. We still can't have the same look and feel of our products and our packaging across all of those different states and countries. So what constitutes a national brand? Is it having that sort of commonality across all of your products and being able to operate from one centralized location? Or is it the footprint that makes you national or the recognition of the brand across the entirety of a country? It's hard to define. I would say that we're certainly trying to be there and getting as close as we can, but every day we figure out reasons why we can't be national. Well, we don't figure them out. People figure them out for us. But but it's challenging for sure, as Kurt said.
Ryan, would you agree?
Yeah, I would agree. I think, when we talked earlier, it really is about creating the best brands that you can, regardless of regulation and national, global intentions in mind.
Now, how would you say is creating good, effective branding? What are some strategies that you use in your everyday that you try to implement?
I think it has a lot to be about first setting the framework and what is your brand is about, and being sticklers about executing it and using this framework as the measuring element for every single channel or tactic you try to activate, and make sure you're consistent. I think devil is in the details, but make sure you have a meaningful story, and that in every single element you deploy, from the packaging, the store, all of these different elements, you're consistent and on point with the story.
Yeah, that consistency is huge.
Yeah.
I mean, you have to be there.
And I would add that I think, the brand actually begins with, it's maybe a little bit overused, but the mission, vision, values of a company. That should then drive the brand from that centralized understanding as to what you value and how you want to communicate who you are. That's the why, right, versus the what of what we're doing. So for Wana, everything comes back to what we believe in and kind of our mission orientation. And, our products are made to serve that. Our employees understand it and communicate that regularly. And then it lives in the packaging and in the visual identity of the brand as well. But if any one of those things is out of line, consumers know, right? Consumers know, and it begins to fall apart. So it's really incumbent, as Patricia was saying, to be adamant, to be sticklers for your brand. And I think that's one of the challenges I think marketers have so often, is that people who are not marketers don't understand that. Well, why can't you move the logo? Why can't you change this thing? Why can't you X, Y, and Z? And it's because there's a very clear focus for a brand in order for them to be successful, and it's our jobs to be stewards of that.
Yeah, without a question. I mean, if we can, when we're branders, if we can have that experience, but also make a memory, that's not really the holy grail, but that's a good spot to be in, and that's what we try for often.
And that's a very interesting point. I'd like to go back to something Joe said. You mentioned that branding happens top down. So to be consistent, to get your product out there and make sure your organization as a whole is taking that on, how exactly do you do that? Where does it come from, Can you explain a little bit more about it?
Sure, and and obviously I'm speaking specific to Wana. I've seen it done right. I've also been part of organizations where it's been done wrong. But my belief would be that it's top down and bottoms up, right? In the sense that the employees that serve that brand have to really understand and embrace it and live it on a daily basis. But if there's not a vision from a centralized location, there are probably instances where brands just happen organically and just grow. And I would say actually for Wana, part of it has been organic, that everyone was able to rally around these goals and ideals before we were really able to articulate them very clearly. People were able to grasp it. One of the first things I did when I came to Wana, in fact, was begin to dissect it and understand what it is about Wana as a brand that people, our employees as well as our customers, really value, so that we could do more of that and less of the things that they don't value. But it has to be, has to come from a centralized location. You have to understand that identity before you can articulate anything externally.
Yeah, the power of the brand starts with our teams, our employees, from the grow to the extraction to the bud tenders. A couple of years ago, we embarked on a repositioning of our flagship brand, The Botanist, and the biggest proof that this worked is now everybody is wearing proudly the T-shirt with The Botanist, with the big logo, and everybody is wearing it with a different posture and attitude, where before, when I joined, nobody wanted to wear any of the, and I think it symbolizes, I'm part of it. I represent this in every single action I take. And if internally, as a company, we feel this love for our brand, then naturally, we can communicate that to consumers.
Yeah, it's total buy-in, right? It's not just sales buy-in, it's not just marketing buy-in, it's cultivation, it's extraction, it's compliance, it's accounting, it's everything that we do. And when you have that, that's really nice. But when you're disconnected, and I've been disconnected before in my career, that's not a good feeling. So, and it hurts the brand.
Yeah, I would add two pieces really. To echo Joe, it's around alignment. So I think the more that your brands are aligned to mission, vision, values of your company, the easier it really is to get buy-in and true support of your employees and your customers. And then the second thing is really around differentiation, right? It exists in every industry, but having brands that aren't different is not a key to success. So really trying to identify what is different, what is a competitive differentiator for this product or this product set and this brand, and then really doubling down on that. The differentiation of today is not the differentiation of tomorrow, so we continually have to be looking forward to how do we be on brand with a specific brand, but differentiate that brand on an ongoing basis.
Yeah, 100%. There's a lot of great retailers in the room today, and thank you for being here, but like how excited would you be if my team came to you with a 1 gram distillate plan? Does that do anything for you? I don't think so. So we have to be different. We have to be innovative. We have to be creative.
So to talk a little bit about differentiators, let's talk about packaging. How effective is packaging in differentiation? I was reading one article and someone said it's the only way to separate yourself. Would you agree with that?
I can't agree with that. I think that's a strong statement. The only way to be different. It's very important, Lauren. I mean, it's very important. But you can't just have one singular source. That's not going to work.
Was it a packaging manufacturer that said that?
I can't disclose the author of the statement.
Yeah, it was our salesman for Yeah, I mean, we're also, we're kind of limited on what we can do. I mean, the packaging is important because that's, with advertising limitations and regulations, that's really one of the only pieces we have. So we have to make it as valuable as possible, but it's not the only piece.
Go ahead, Brian.
Yeah, I mean, for those of you in the room who have never done packaging design in cannabis, you really can't minimize, when you're creating a brand or multiple brands, and you really want to carry that brand message and that brand essence to every market. And a state makes you put a symbol that's larger than your logo on the package and literally change all of your artwork. I mean, it's difficult in branding to have brands that traverse states and still talk to the consumer the same way.
Mm-hmm. And that's all the more so difficult that now the consumer reality, because of the progress we've made in recent years with cannabis legalization and regulation, for them it's a seamless continuum. They go from one state to the other and they expect pretty much like you would do with your toothpaste, from Connecticut to Maine, it's going to be the same one that you buy. And no, it's going to look slightly different. It's still the same brand, it's still the same product, but the names can vary, the potency can vary, the look can. So it's really a labor of love, or I think it's a great mind game for us to try to find commonalities, because a brand also needs to be efficient in everything it does. We're trying to cut costs, to minimize the number of containers, flexible, variable packaging, all these elements. So you're not only trying to make everything fit on the real estate that much, which is really too much copy anybody should put in the size of the stamp, but there's all these other elements. So it's a phenomenal challenge to get to a point where you have 1 or 2 containers that fit every single form factor you can think about, while being compliant and all these elements. And also, I think packaging is really fundamental in our industry because, for the cannabis explorers, you go to the dispensary, you get all the, the talking with the bud tenders, and then you come back home, all you have left is, the container. Yeah. So how do we make it a gateway or a portal to more explanation and make sure people are still confident? So if you look at some, for instance, Canadian packaging regulation, you look at this and like, oh my God, this is a different environment. So how do you create in all these contexts still an experience at the packaging level?
Yeah, not to mention there's circumstances where the customer, till they get home, doesn't ever even see the package.
Yeah.
And that's another challenge.
And can you talk a little bit about how you go about choosing your packaging, whether it's die-cut bags, tuna cans, or the jars? What makes you choose a particular package for that brand?
So I think it's a multi-pronged process. I mean, first there's, I'm going to put being on brand last, but it's protecting the quality of the product and making sure freshness, all of this, it's really airtight to, maintain the quality and the shelf life. I think there's also operational constraints. How many touches, if your packaging is beautiful, but it takes 10 employees 5 days to fill in and there's all these moving pieces, it's no go because we really need to be efficient when it comes to our output. And there's the cost. How do we get, leverage our national footprint for the cost of goods and just the cost of the packaging? We're also doing a lot of work with sustainability and coming with some biodegradable or compostable packaging, because we also want, even though I just said packaging is very important, I want it to disappear and not leave any mark in the environment ultimately. So we're also taking this into consideration. And then there's branding, and I would like to have one container, one branding everywhere. I mean, Joe and Juana, they stand for the Calyx container, and like get to this ubiquity of we have one container that is, for everybody.
Yeah, it's not just operational efficiencies, which is important, which a lot of people really don't think about. It's from a dispensary level. How easy is that package for them to check in? How easy is it for them to store, to move with their employees as well? So it's a deeper thought than just internally. But yeah, there's a lot to it.
Yeah, I mean, from a flower perspective, I mean, we talked about it a little bit before. Do you want to put your flower in a bag or a jar? It depends whether or not you're premium or whether you're value. I mean, we always want quality in the package, right? But it really does depend on what kind of brand and what type of differentiation within that brand you're trying to conjure.
Yeah, great point. We just went through a packaging change on our premium flower, and nobody get upset with me, but I love Mylars. I don't know why, I really like Mylars. And the Mylar wouldn't work for a premium flower brand because it would jeopardize the bud structure. So we couldn't make that move. And I think that's Ryan's point. There's not one package that I think suits all product types, but you have to be smart on which one you choose for that product type.
Patricia, I want to come back to something that you said, choosing eco-friendly types of packaging. Was that something consumer-driven where you could use it more as a marketing piece, or is that more organizational, mission-driven?
All of the above. In Maine, we were, when I was an operator for many years, we had a partnership with TerraCycle, so we were able to return all our bags, but also at the facility, air nets and all of that, and that was enabling us to take away from landfills hundreds of pounds every year, even thousands of pounds of plastic. We were also incentivizing consumers to bring back their packaging and all of that, and it's very relevant with the millennial and all these generations. The misnomer is often that it's going to cost us more, but I think from a brand equity and resonance with your target audience, I think it's really paramount. It's a great investment.
Yeah. We could be better, and I'd like to be better. I'm from Boulder, Colorado, so you live off the land, wear Birkenstocks, all that. But it's something that we're definitely sensitive to, and I think we all have a responsibility to accept that and try to make changes to be more positive.
What about pricing to consumer? How does that impact the type of packaging that you picked for a certain brand?
It has to be part of it, right? Anyone who says it's not is either way up in the stratosphere in terms of their pricing and their premium on their products, which doesn't really work so well in cannabis right now, or they're not being realistic. So all of those elements have to go into it. It's production, it's the dispensaries, it's the pricing. And pricing, I think sometimes if you're not in that world, you don't realize that for every 10 cents you add to the cost, then there's the cost of the goods sold, and then to the retailer, and then to the consumer, and before you know it, you're adding $2 onto the cost of the product to cover the cost of additional 20 cents in packaging per unit. So it's a challenging and complex situation to find that right fit between this is right for my brand, it's right for my product, it's right for the environment, and oh, by the way, it also allows me to price this at the right price point.
And I think that's also where we have a responsibility as operator to challenge our vendor partners. You know, when people come to me and say, oh, we have this new packaging, this new vape, I'm like, okay, what are you doing? What, do you have any hemp-based product? Do you have this? Do you have, you know, pushing our entire industry and collectivity of, you know, minds to find solutions. There start to be many more solutions, more affordable than a few years ago. We're really getting to a place where it's almost there. So let's give it another push. Yeah. All of us on the stage, we can do it.
I think we analyze our pricing on packaging all the time, and you know you have to match your brand, but to try to pass on $2 more a unit to the market and to the end user, it's not going to work. It's just we've tried it and we've failed. So.
Now, what about zoning out 10 feet on a national scale? How do you deal with packaging rules and regulations when they vary state to state? I think we touched upon it a little bit, but just can you expand more kind of how you actually implement in that kind of market?
Sure.
Sorry, I just want to make sure I understand the question. You're saying how do we deal with the variety of regulations across all these states when it comes to packaging?
Yep, exactly.
Gotcha. Go ahead.
So, you know, when we talk about building brands, and you know, it was the national question before. It's, you know, we want to create brands that aren't limited, but with the regulations in mind. And so, you know, our hope is that regulations get more lenient over time and more realistic. But we want to build the brands that we believe the consumers want. So we will build those brands, and then we will filter them back based on the regulations of the states that we're trying to get into.
Smart.
Yeah, you know, we talked about this a little bit earlier. I don't believe in playing to the lowest common denominator. I believe in pushing boundaries as best we can, but we can't always, right? And so I have a situation right now where I have two products that are different products. They're both sleep products, and one is fast acting, one is not. The state in question had issues with the name of the product, or even some of the words that we had on there as being, you know, quote, medical claims, right? So now I have two products that are both sleep products that are not differentiated because nothing on the packaging says that it is. And frankly, I think it's a disservice to the consumer. I think the more we are forced to remove information, and I understand, you know, we don't want to make false claims. We don't want to let someone think that, you know, our product cures cancer. Of course, you know, those are the extreme situations. But having information on the packaging is a critical cue for the consumer. You know, markets that don't allow for fruit on the packaging. Well, how does the consumer understand what the flavor profile is of a product? That's not critical, right? But nonetheless, it's still an important piece of information for the consumer. So we try to, you know, we just went through a rebranding of our packaging over the last year where we got rid of all the fruit and we tried to find the packaging that allowed us to express the brand in a way that still felt genuine to who we are, but also didn't completely, you know, sanitize it and bring it down to just a white box with our gummies in there. So it's a challenge. It's ongoing. It's very costly. You know, when we talk about waste in this industry, so often that waste is driven by regulatory changes midstream that require us to get rid of a bunch of packaging, and it's tough.
And I think the only way to deal with it is to go and see regulators and explain to them.
100%.
I mean, in my experience as an operator, you know, regulator intent is more often than not like in a good place, but they don't realize all the implication it can have for us. Or, you know, when they change, oh, you know, now it has to be in point whatever versus this, and you need to destroy everything. You know, they don't realize that we can't make those pivots in like 1 or 2 weeks, that it's a much longer stream for us to adjust to some of the things. And so, you know, it doesn't always work, but, you know, going to meet and talk to regulators to make them understand the consequences and what it means for an entire industry often works.
Yeah, I mean, Joe said it. I mean, we are doing a disservice to the customer. I mean, the way our language has to be written, the messaging that we can give, that is something I'd love to see change, and change quickly.
And I think actually this challenge, it's beyond even just the packaging. It's, you know, we often are given a mission to educate and communicate, but we're not allowed to have a voice. you can only have a little tiny logo. You can't, I mean, there's some markets where you could not even have a web page or anything like that. So how can we have a voice and do all these things, and you're putting us in shackles? So it's, it's one of the challenging in our industry, finding a voice when nobody wants to give you the mean to do that. So it always goes back to fundamentals of the human relation in the product.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think we're asking for making strong medical claims. That's not what any of us are about. But highlighting the benefits, that's something we should be allowed to do.
The potential benefits.
Yeah, it's there.
Can you talk a little bit more too about when you start working with regulators? Is it a proactive approach before a product goes into market? It's kind of a gray area. You're not sure how it's going to be accepted. You get them involved, or is it more of a reactive, put it in the market, see how the regulators, if at all, respond?
It varies by market, right? Because the regulators are set up differently by market. Some have the ability to actually allow you to submit and get approvals, et cetera, and they do it in a timely fashion. Others have that opportunity and they don't do it in a timely fashion, which completely kind of screws up everyone's timelines. And then there's some where, and this unfortunately I think is the most, where they live in gray intentionally, right? You're not going to get a clear answer. You're going to get an answer once you put it in market and once they decide, but regulators are very often not in the mood to say yes or no to things. They're more in the mood to say, well, this is what the regulations say, you can translate it.
Very non-committal.
Yeah, and I would also say, not to be negative, but I have 2 emails this morning from a regulator in a state not to be mentioned that they don't know their own regulations. So they're literally telling us that THCV isn't allowed in products, and it is allowed in the products within the state. So, the regulations change rapidly in all these markets. It's important to have as much of a proactive relationship with the regulator in the state as you can, and I think we all try and do that.
Yeah.
We do.
Now, switching topics a bit, I'd like to talk about demographics and studies on demographics. So in preparing for the panel, I was reading a couple of studies. Millennials seem to be the majority of consumers of cannabis in the US right now. They're said to use more sleep aids than any of their Gen X or baby boomer counterparts. I'm just curious, how up are you on demographic studies? Is it important when you're putting out a new product or trying to think of a new product to put out in market?
Yeah, I don't know about you guys, but we're using data more than we ever have. You can't ignore the generational tendencies. That it is a piece of this business, and data is faster, it's deeper, it's more accurate. So we're using that quite a bit. It's not the only thing we look at, but data drives a lot of our decisions.
Yeah, I would say we're talking about demographic data daily around our brands, and I think Joe said it the other day, we try and keep the net pretty wide. We do believe that cannabis consumers, a Gen Xer and a baby boomer and a millennial may all like the same product if the brand resonates properly with them.
Yeah, it's a great point, and we look at it from use cases more so than specific demography for that very reason. We want to be appealing, and we believe it can be appealing to multiple generations of consumers because they have the same fundamental need, like sleep, for example, right? To solve that with cannabis. And so if we can make a product that is not necessarily offensive to one of those groups, and I have seen some products that I find offensive in their branding, but I won't mention any of those. But yeah, it is possible to be offensive with branding, but in our case, we try to be as open and welcoming as we can across generations.
Sorry, Joe, I'll change those.
Appreciate that.
Yeah.
What about celebrity endorsements? Does it work with cannabis branding?
Well, we've clearly seen some work, many fail. If the celebrity is really aligned with the brand and is genuine, which I haven't seen that often, but when they are, I think there's an opportunity for it to work. I think I spent 25 years in the wine and spirits industry where we did a lot of celebrity brands and endorsements, and some of them worked and some of them failed. I think for us as a company, we just have to look at each business case and see if it makes sense and see what the buy-in of that celebrity is. If you just want to act like you're in the cannabis business and be cool because you have a flower brand or a concentrate brand, you're not my partner. That's just not the right fit.
I think it takes real dedication. A flash in the pan, several appearances, it may give you a bump, but it's not going to continue that trajectory. So I think, Tyson being a good example, I mean, he's pretty actively engaged with the brand, or so it seems, and doing a lot of field work with them. I haven't seen too many other celebrities take it as seriously as he has, and I think if others did, there's more opportunity for potential, but I think largely, those people have other jobs, right? And this is a part-time, kind of quick win that isn't going to work long-term in cannabis.
I think, too, what we're talking about is the difference between a celebrity-driven brand and product versus a celebrity endorsement. And I think the endorsements, actually this is true for both of those parts of it, is that the cannabis consumer is actually fairly savvy, and they understand when someone is disingenuous about the product or what they're trying to sell. So that's issue number one. But issue number two is when you have broad celebrity endorsements, Kardashians being the most obvious example, you have a much broader mass market to reach with those endorsements, and so you have a greater chance of success. We know that approximately 20% of the public consumes cannabis on any sort of regular basis. And so you're talking about a far smaller group of people that can be then influenced by that influencer.
Well said.
Now, I'm going to ask each of you to take out your crystal ball. So there's a lot of talk about rescheduling marijuana to a Schedule III drug. Does that change your approach if that happens on branding, your strategies of branding?
That's a big question.
I don't think it changes our approach too much in the short, until we understand, is it interstate commerce, is it not? What does descheduling really, or rescheduling really mean? Until we get the bullet points of what that's actually going to mean, like I said before, I think we build brands without the filter of state regulations, and therefore, I think we're ready to be rescheduled as soon as possible.
Yeah, I think it's nice to know that it might be happening and it's closer than ever. But, I've been in this industry long enough that it's supposed to happen next year for 10 years. So I'm not going to hold my breath on that, and just focus on what we do best, which is great products solving problems for a specific target. And when it happens and we have the rules of the games or get closer to that, because in my experience, that's often where there's, the rule making is the longest pathway, then we'll do that. But I'm not counting on it as of yet.
Yeah, we can't change our business plan, our model, our mission, our values, betting on the come. I hope it comes, but until that happens, I mean, it's business as usual and just trying to do the best thing we can for the industry and for our customers.
Yeah, one thing to add, I guess, is, I think the one thing that rescheduling almost definitely would do is bring the FDA closer to cannabis. And therefore, there are some states and some regulations out there that are leaning that way. Good manufacturing practices come to mind in Maryland, where you can't produce high-dose edibles unless you've got a GMP-certified kitchen. I think we're going to see more of that, would be my guess. And those are expensive things to build and expensive things to maintain, but certainly kind of the bleeding edge of cannabis innovation.
And Ryan, I'm going to pick on you for a second. If that does happen, what should operators be ready for? How do they get ready for that type of insight from the FDA?
It's really about getting experts involved. I mean, there's a lot of really good GMP consultants out there. It's not a quick fix. It's not like you can decide next month I want to be GMP. These projects take a long time, and they take considerable amounts of money and considerable amount of resources, both internally and externally. So, it's a long game in terms of GMP and FDA. But I do believe, my crystal ball, I do believe those things are going to be required down the road.
Patricia, I see you nodding. I just want to know if
Yeah, no, I totally agree with Ryan, and that's something we can do, but I think we should continuously do. It's own in on our skill and how we grow, how we produce and better or advance our processes, protocols, all of that. So I think that's something we can plan for, because I think it's part of the natural evolution of what we do as operators. But it's costly, I agree. It's just, it's all these costly things we have to weigh in and pick from.
Can you talk a little bit about how you use different advertising strategies over the 50-state, patchwork of regulations? For example, some states allow billboard advertising, some don't. Can you just talk a little bit about how that relates to your branding strategies?
Ours are, to the point, very state by state, right? So I don't, back to the question you asked earlier about national, I very infrequently, when I look at something on a national level and say, this is right for all of my markets and I have access to this property across all markets and channels. So we're forced to look state by state, and each state is its own market. We're fond of saying every market is a market in my company, and it's true. So I can't really look at it and say, well, this is the right thing for everybody. I can only say this is the right thing for this state at this time with these competitors in this situation, and my challenges with the consumer or consumer pull-through or whatever we identify in that market is the challenge. So we do a very state-by-state approach, but we also experiment a lot. So, and there are some platforms that allow me to, like programmatic advertising, for example, where I can choose which markets I want to leverage by geo-targeting the advertising and potentially highlight certain products that are available in those key markets that maybe aren't available in others. So I do have some access to tools that allow me to be a little bit more broad, but even then I'm really thinking about it on a market by market basis. So to the specific question you asked, programmatic is a great way to reach a lot of markets, but not super great for conversion. It doesn't really give me a whole lot of data. As a brand in particular, dispensaries are a little bit different, but as a brand, I get awareness mostly out of it. Billboards, we just put up some great ones in Missouri that I love that are, I think, great for broad awareness. I think for marketers, we have to understand, it's an old analogy, but the funnel analogy, like what am I looking to do with my marketing? Am I looking to tell everybody about my brand and that I have products available, or am I looking to get someone into a store to buy my product at that store and convert them to revenue? So all of that goes into the mix when I'm thinking about what channels I tap into.
Yeah, I also think you've done a phenomenal job at this, but I also think it goes back to that word consistency. I mean, when you think about these different markets, I want somebody buying a brand. I'm only Massachusetts for now, but I want someone buying a brand in Colorado and Washington and California here, and it's the exact same brand, same coloring, same messaging where you can. Now, obviously, we have regulations we have to deal with, but I think there's a core of your brand that you can carry over to every market. So, and that consistency is important.
For us, it has really been about building relationship. I mean, we are vertically integrated, so we have direct access to all the consumers. So build, CRM platforms, really the digital ecosystem overall, but also be almost looking at the funnel upside down and really starting being top of mind when people are about to make a purchase. So a lot of the initiatives with digital merchandising, with IR Janes and so on and so forth are really demonstrating paramount ROI. When you see ROI like $19 for $1 invested, I mean that works and that builds an entire momentum. So kind of not investing a lot on billboards because we haven't seen a clear ROI on this one, but like really taking it one consumer, one purchaser at a time.
Yeah, I guess the interesting thing I have to add is, we're looking at ROAS all the time, return on advertising spend, and, market to market, it's different. Like Facebook might be really strong in one market and Weed Maps is strong in another. So it really is about understanding the market, what works, what are the regulations, and then picking the best of breed solutions for that market.
Yeah, Ryan's so terrific. I mean, if you're not analyzing your spend to see what it meant, you are really missing a big piece of the equation here.
And how frequent would you say that you do analyze the ad spend based on market?
Say that again?
How often do you analyze the ad spend?
After every spend, so.
Or even before, I mean, each tactic needs to have a predicted ROI and you measure against that because otherwise would you do it, right?
Yeah.
I mean, for me, that's a fundamental change. It's, marketing is not about a cool visual to put on Instagram. It's okay, what's your engagement clip? What's all those things? It's really granular when it comes to the data at the decision point, but also at the follow-up. And for us, we do a lot of test and learn. So we try on a small scale, look at it, and then deploy if it's positive. But you need to measure your data all the time.
Yeah, if I make spends that lose money,
Yeah.
you guys won't see me here next year. So.
What about, can you talk a little bit about how it is or strategies you use to work with your partners on marketing your brands, making sure you have a consistent brand, kind of that teeter-tottering of maybe a partner has another idea or they don't like your idea. Can you just touch upon kind of strategies you use to navigate that?
You have the most
can.
experience.
Yeah, you got it, Joe.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's a couple ways we handle that. One, we own the brand, right? It's Wana, right? That is the brand. And so while I appreciate input and support from partners, we're pretty adamant that any decision that they're going to make regarding our brand needs to go through us. And sometimes it's great, right? Wonderful, here are the assets you need, go for it. Other times we say, well, no, that's not what we're going to do. And, you know, unfortunately, we don't see eye to eye on that. We try to head that off, though, by having a really strong library of assets that we share with our partners, right? So we try to create so much material, so much good material for them that they'd rather get it from us than build it themselves, because we give them access to so much information and visuals and messaging and, you know, fully produced videos and things like that. So by creating that library of assets, that's another way that we control the brand. Lastly, we have discovered over the years that having our own people in market, even if our partner maybe is responsible contractually for some of the marketing or some of the sales, having our own people in the market really, really does make a difference, because we can not only influence those discussions, but we can also see sometimes if maybe the market or the partner isn't fully abiding by the letter of the contract, where they have to get things approved by us. So.
And I also think if we did our job, due diligence on vetting partners, you know, and setting expectations and everyone being aligned, that helps a lot. But, you know, one or with Tricia or even Ryan, I mean, the amount of support and the amount of collateral they can give to a partner, they're the experts. I mean, why, you know, we've done this, we know what we're doing, and protecting your brand is so important.
Yeah, I would say, you know, Joe and what they've done at Wana has been pretty incredible in terms of having a lot of successful partnerships. And coming from, you know, the cannabis industry and doing partnerships myself, they are very, very hard to make successful. And I think having the assets like Joe's saying and producing them ahead of the need is really critical. But ultimately, you know, partnerships are difficult in cannabis. So, you know, kudos to those that survive.
Yeah.
Yeah, well said.
And that's why for us as a company, partnership, a lot of brands come to us so that we produce or do some collaboration. And we're very, very discerning, because there's many things that needs to be evaluated and due diligence, because we want to be, our mission is to be the best partner we can be. So we want to make sure that if we partner with a brand, we deliver above and beyond, and we expect it's a mutual expectation too. So because otherwise, I think it will not be a success. So partnership, I agree, it's challenging.
So we have about 2 minutes or so for Q&A. If anybody in the audience has a question they want to ask the panel. Yep, go ahead.
Mike Cloud. We've talked a lot about brands. The only comment about pricing had to do whether pricing drove packaging. I'm really much more interested in whether product differentiation is actually driving pricing power and price differentiation. Does anyone want to comment?
I think it does.
100%.
Yeah, I think it does. I mean, I think, you know, it's harder to maybe see on the flower side of the equation where, you know, what's the difference between value and premium flower. But I think on the edible side, it is pretty clear to see there are some folks that demand top dollar and move least on price in their category. And I think a lot of that is driven down to quality of the product, quality of the input of the THC, quality of the packaging, quality of the marketing support around it. You know, those differentiating points, I think, drive real incremental value and price.
Yeah, that's 100% our strategy. Innovation, differentiation, the ability to put products out there that can't be replicated. You know, that allows us to be a premium product, as well as as you point out, Ryan, the ingredients we put in, organic sweeteners and our fast-acting technology that we use for Mazuka. So all of those are reasons for the consumer to believe they are paying a premium for a reason, right, for a better product.
And did I see one more question out there? We have a little bit. Oh, yep, go ahead.
Question I have is, when you're talking about building a national brand, how do you drive product consistency state to state, as well as educate your principal salespeople who are the bud tenders to deliver the key message and attributes of the new product?
Yeah, great question.
It is a great question. I mean,
Go ahead.
you know, we all try to put SOPs in place, and we all give educational support. We give, you know, out-of-state support, but you're not there all the time when you eventually hand over the brand, and that's a risk you take. But from the sales team to the, you know, production team, you just got to stay on top of it, and it's not an easy game, but it's super important for the brand because, like I said before, what you buy in Colorado should be what you buy here, and what you buy in New York, or however that looks. So we try to do the best possible job and give as much support and be on the streets with them, but there's a small risk.
Yeah. Go ahead, Patricia.
There's more and more tools also for bud tenders, education, you know, Seed Talent, or all of these platforms where you can have people or invite them through and incentivize them to take some brand trainings that we do either virtually or in person, and we do regularly because there's always a big turnover in this industry at retail, namely, but we also do a lot of in-person visits to really bring, to make our brands, their mission, their values a reality beyond just, you know, clicking through a screen. We're really trying to create an ambassadorship program so that bud tenders can relay it as well. I mean, we hope as well as we would. But and from a product standpoint, yeah, I agree. It's QC all the time and SOPs and making sure it's on point. Mystery shopping is my favorite. I recommend mystery shopping wherever you go, whenever you travel. Set time aside for it to see what your brand look like, feel like in another state, and you realize they can be adrift. So always going back to staying constantly on top of it and all the details.
Yeah, we have a subject matter expert team for every one of our core products, and those folks travel around the country, and they'll be the first to train a new team, deploy the original SOPs, and then continually go back over time and make sure that we haven't kind of deviated from that.
Great. Well, we're out of time for this panel. I just want to thank the panelists for their great insights. I know it was a great discussion.
Thank you.